pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, without for the moving of the water, waiting for the movement of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him laying there, and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" So we're just going to stop there for a second. It's a lot that just happened in this little bit of passage that we read. So the first thing is we see the man sitting at the pool but Jesus is coming for a festival. They don't tell us what feast that he's coming to in Jerusalem, but we know it's a Sabbath day. So we know from the Old Testament, especially Leviticus and Numbers, which we just got out of, that the Sabbath is important to the Jews because I think it's in Leviticus, or it may be in Exodus, when Moses first told them to hold up the Sabbath. Some people didn't listen, and so the first day that they did the Sabbath, God told them, okay, you got to kill those folks because they don't want to listen to me. It was a very interesting time. And so now they kept the Sabbath until now. And so every Sunday, which now we worship on Sunday, but they were supposed to rest on that day, not to do anything. And now we see the pool of Bethesda. Now in some Bibles, some of the bottom of chapter verse 3 and all of verse 4 is taken out because they say it's not in certain manuscripts. But I think that context in verse 3 and verse 4 is very important. Otherwise, you don't understand what the pool of Bethesda is to these people and why there are so many people sitting there. Because without verse 3 and verse 4, looking at it, you'd be like, why is this man just sitting here for 38 years and talking about he wants to have miracles happen without that context of the angel coming and stirring the waters and somebody being healed? We know that this was actually happening because why else would the man be sitting there for 38 years if people weren't being healed when the water was stirred? Otherwise, if he was there for year 1, nobody got healed when the water was stirred, I'd be like, well, I'm going to cross somewhere else. Even though I can't walk, I'm not about to stay here. But obviously there were miracles happening at the pool of Bethesda because, he's waiting there for 38 years. So 38 years of bondage, 38 years of suffering. It's a lot of miracles like that. The woman with the issue of blood for 12 years. This man waited for 38 years. And the first thing Jesus asked him, which if I was him, I won't tell y'all I'm going to tell y'all what I'd do if I was him. But Jesus asked him, the first thing that he asked him is, do you want to be healed? That's an annoying question because it says in verse 6 that he knew that the man had the condition for a long time. So instead of Jesus coming and saying, hey man, I know you've been suffering for a long time. Let me help you out. He said, hey, do you want to be healed? Now that's funny because, see, I have a bad mouth. So I would have told Jesus, obviously I'm sitting here at the pool of Bethesda, so you already know what that means. I want to get healed, but that's just me. So, especially now, sometimes we read the Bible so we know what's going to happen. So sometimes we don't put ourselves in the position that person was in. So I know some of you are thinking, no, I would have said yes. I would have just answered yes. Yeah, because you know who Jesus is. Imagine if some random man came up to you and said, hey, do you want all your bills paid? What are you going to tell him? First off, you're going to be like, I don't know who you are, sir. I'm standing in line at the bank and you asking me, do I need money for my bills to be paid? You see my check in my hand. Obviously, I'm going to put the money in the bank to go pay my bills. Because that's how I would have responded to Jesus. You don't know who he is. You haven't even heard about all his miracles because in this part of John, Jesus had only done 2 miracles thus far, and he had done those in private. The wedding at Cana, only some of the disciples knew, and the servants who helped them pour the water into the basins knew about that miracle. And so at this point, who is this guy? Just some random dude that's asking me, do I want to get healed? So my issue is, with us, God asks us questions all the time. And how do we respond to those questions? Because it's easy to look at this man at the pool of Bethesda and say, well, obviously he should have been excited about what Jesus was asking him. But God asks us questions all the time. Do you want to know me more? Do you want to abide in me? You say, well, obviously I want to abide to you. I'm at Bible study tonight. But is this the first time you open your Bible this week? That in front of everybody else? How can you abide in me when you don't have a private time with me and you don't have a private life with me? Do you want to talk to me? You say, obviously I do. I get on 6 a.m. prayer. But if you only get on 6 a.m. prayer listening to somebody on Zoom, or in my case, praying that I don't go to sleep as I lay down listening to it, when I do get on, because sometimes I'm just like, not today, Lord. I can't get on Zoom. And sometimes somebody be on there, they be really going for it. And it's like, it's 6 in the morning, y'all. Can you come with the smooth voice and pray a little more? You know, they trying to start you off on, light a fire under you that day. But if you only coming to Zoom prayer or not coming to Zoom prayer and not praying to God by yourself, so God's like, hey, do you want to come abide in me? You're like, yeah, obviously I do. I'm doing all these things. But Jesus asked this question because he wanted to know if the man wanted to be healed. And so let's go to verse 7, and this is the only verse we're going to read. This is funny what the man says. He says, the sick man answered him, sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me. Beautiful, isn't it? Jesus asked him, do you want to be healed? Just like God asks us things all the time. Do you want to abide in me? What's the first thing he did? He gave his reason for not being healed. That's not what Jesus asked him. If I ask you, do you want some money? And you say, well, I would have money if I went to the bank yesterday and I had the $100 in my wallet. Okay, what did that have to do with anything that I just asked you? If somebody says, hey, if you ever had some friends, you try to take them out to eat, and you be like, what do you want? And they're like, man, I don't got no money. That's not the question I'm asking you. And I'm tempted to always say, you know what? Since you don't got no money, you ain't going to eat. The Lord is working on me, I promise you. Every day I grow closer to him. I'm tempted many times every day to wear my mouth out, but you know, I always think about the verse where God says, you're going to have to make an account for everything that you say. And I'm like, Lord, do I have to make an account for everything that I thought about? But yeah, so he makes an excuse. So he gives him a reason. The reason I'm not healed is because I have nobody to take me to the pool. But why are we always telling God the reason that we are the way we are and we always have an excuse or an explanation for what we are, but not an answer to his question of what he wants to do through us. And that's an issue. And that's what Jesus was getting at. We're gonna get closer to that in a second. So, what are our excuses in our lives? I know for me, for Zoom, I'm not gonna lie. The alarm goes off. I turn off the alarm, and for some reason, the body finds itself back in bed in the warm covers, especially in the wintertime. It's so cold outside, and the blankets are so warm. And then, you know, I have the excuse of I don't want to get on my phone early. I try to stay off my phone until I'm fresh and awake. So if I get on my phone, I may or may not get on Zoom. So it's better to be asleep than to be on my phone for the wrong reasons, right? Right? Thank you for encouraging me not to get on Zoom. I appreciate everybody who agrees. Power to the people, right? And then 6 p.m., I have a whole nother reason of excuses. For 6 p.m., I'm like, Lord, I'm cooking. I'm not even going to be focused on the prayer. So why get on the prayer if I'm not going to be listening and praying together? Or, you know, I'm coming home from work. Oh, I'm driving. I got to stay focused on the road. Knowing I was playing music going to work or, you know, doing things like that. So the other reason that we don't, you know, when God asks us directly what we want, what do you want? Sometimes we're more comfortable with what we got than seeking for what we could possibly not get. So when Jesus, he probably had been asked multiple times if he wanted to be healed. And by this point, he's like, nobody's going to help me out. So why would I explain to you, yes, I want to be healed? It's been 38 years. We have to assume in every calendar year, 365 days, he got asked at least once every year, did he want to be healed? Because there's no way he didn't get asked that. He's sitting there. So if he got asked 37 times before this is the 38th time, I'm not going to lie. I'd be like, at this point, I'm going to explain to you everything that I explained to everybody else before that. Either you're going to help me climb into this pool when the water is stirred, or you can get out of my face. And that's what happens to us sometimes. Many people have been coming to us, asking us if we want this, if we want that, so that when Jesus comes to us, we're like, at this point, I've already answered this question 30 times. because Mr. McGillicuddy and his friends already answered it, and Mr. Wrench answered it. I don't need to I'm going to tell you exactly what I told them, because at this point, nobody's going to help me do this thing that I want to do. And that's dangerous, because oftentimes we become comfortable, and let me know if I'm talking too fast, because sometimes I rush in my speech. My wife told me one time, I asked her like 7 questions in a row, and I was like, I'm sorry. My brain is, we're supposed to be one, so she's basically in my mind, so I can just shoot off, but I'm working on it. But yeah, so we asked, so all these things that people have asked us, automatically we have our excuse already played out. He probably didn't even think about his response. He had gotten so used to saying it that it just came out. Do you want to be healed? Well, I can't be, because nobody's going to take me to the water. Somebody always get healed before I get healed. So here I sit. And then I'm thinking in my head, and again, this is me looking outside as a reader, why didn't he crawl super close and sit at the edge every day at all times to be ready to just roll in? But that's my thought process. Probably was a lot of reasons why he didn't sit at the edge. Probably was no shade at the edge. It probably was uncomfortable to be at the edge. And, after being there for so long, why am I going to sit super close if every time I try to get something bad happens to me? And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. So he stays where he wants to be comfortable. In our own lameness, we can find reasons to not move forward. I'm not going to lie, I have a lot of reasons not to do certain things, because I do it, nothing happens, I'm like, whatever. I don't feel like doing this anymore. And I've done that with a few things. And yeah, tonight is God convict everybody tonight. Since I'm being convicted, we all can be convicted together. You get conviction. You get conviction. Jemiah, you right? You get some. Go ahead, catch that. So yeah, are we in our own lameness, are we allowing ourselves to find reasons not to move forward? Because Paul talked about the thorn in his side. And, he could have confided in the thorn and said, you know what? I'm going to sit here and not do anything because I'm hurt. And that's what we do all the time. We get hurt in many different ways, emotionally, physically, even mentally. Sometimes you're just tired. I'm not going to lie. You wake up in the morning, you're like, Lord, do I really need this job to pay these bills? The only motivation for me now is Jemiah. If I was by myself, I probably would just say, it is what it is. I'd be in my car. But, the Lord gives me courage to keep coming to work. And so that's what we do. We have our excuses. And now verse 8 is important. Jesus said to him, rise, take up your bed, and walk. So, Jesus asked him a question directly. Do you want to be healed? And then he gives his excuse. So then Jesus says, okay, let's make it easy. Pick up your bed and get out of here. And so that's a challenge for us as well. So, we're giving God all these excuses. God, I can't do this and that because my shoe was untied last Tuesday and I almost tripped and fell. So if I try to do my Bible study on Wednesdays, I might trip and fall last Tuesday. So this Tuesday I couldn't do it. So God makes it plain. And he makes it plain for all of us at all times. It's simple. Hey, he tells you, hey, go tell this person that I'm there for them. And you're like, I don't know if I should. And knowing that you can say every cuss word in the cuss word dictionary to somebody, call them an upside down bunt cake and whatever you want to call them. But when God says, hey, go tell this person that I hear their prayers, you're like, did God really tell me to say that? God sure didn't tell you to call somebody an upside down bunt cake, but you said that. So how are you going to doubt God when it comes to doing those things? Thankfully, let's read chapter 5, verses 9 through 15 now. Thankfully, the man listens, and immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. That day was the Sabbath. And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to him who was cured, it is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. He answered them, he who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. Then they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, and a multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see that you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. very interesting verses here. A miracle happens. The man listens to Jesus, picks up his bed and walk, you know? And instead of the religious leaders who are seeking the Messiah and hoping that he comes and were excited when John the Baptist was preaching that the Messiah is on his way, seeing this miracle, they say, who told you how dare you do this on the Sabbath? How dare you pick up your bed and walk? Not recognizing the authority of the Messiah in that place. So this is important for us. This is important for us. A lot of people have miracles and testimonies. And sometimes, instead of rejoicing, including me, I'm not going to lie, sometimes I'm more focused on the soundboard than I am on what's going on in service. And I'll be like, Lord, how can I do both? How can I do both? But sometimes you're just like, oh, whatever, we already know that was going to happen, you know. Especially when, you know, it hurts real hard when you paid your bills this month and somebody get up and say, I didn't have no money to pay my bills. And out of nowhere, the Lord paid all of my bills. I'm like, Lord, so here I am, paying my bills on time. You couldn't just give me the miracle as well? Slip something in. I hate a check came in the mail. I look in the mail every day. I'm like, Lord, one day my check will come in the mail. Please. And now in this generation, they don't even send checks. Maybe a indescribable direct deposit just gonna fall into the bank one day, hopefully. But sometimes we become, you know, we see other people getting miracles and we're like, how dare he get a miracle? Because I can say, well, I'm an elder in this church. Lord, you ain't gave me no bills paid. And the crazy part about it is, we don't be recognizing the miracles in our own lives as well. Because while they didn't have anything to pay their bills, the miracle for me was I had enough to pay my bills. But instead of being grateful for what I have, you know, I'm more critical of what they got. Because it's like, how come God don't help me out? And God's like, man, you worked your job, you got the money, you paid the bills, and you had enough money to eat with, and you want me to do some more for you. So yeah, are we celebratory for people who are experiencing miracles, or are we the ones who say, nah, she can't have that miracle because her dress was too high? Wow, she was delivered, and you're mad because her dress is too high. Are we too focused on, you know, how dare she praise the Lord while she on the praise team? She should be praising down here and not up there. You're not supposed to do that when you're on the praise team. It complicates life. For you, not for us, but for you, it gets more complicated. Because now, instead of focusing on the miracles that God is doing in the place, you're more critical of the miracles to whom the miracles are happening to. And when you're focused more on who the miracle is happening to and not recognizing the Messiah around you, you're just like the religious leaders. And it's going to get even more interesting in a second. So when God does miracles around us, we should be able to recognize them and celebrate them, even though, you know, you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. But if God tells you, hey, pick up your bed and walk, this man hasn't walked for 38 years. He's been on Sabbath for 38 years. He finally had an opportunity to do something, and you're mad about it. That's really interesting. Why would you be angry about something for somebody who finally had a chance to move? They obviously knew the man. They was like, who told you you can walk with your bed? Y'all know where I'm coming from. You know what struggles I dealt with. Why are you mad at me for being healed? And we see that happen a lot of times. You know, some people are friends with you when you're down and you're doing the worst things ever. As soon as you do right, they mad at you. I've seen it a lot of times in churches. You know, the wife is praying for her husband. Lord, can y'all pray? My husband, he really needs to get saved. The husband comes to the church, gets saved, starts serving in the church. What's the first thing the wife do? You don't see the wife no more. And now the husband up there saying, pray for my wife. For some reason, as soon as I got right with God, she left. Why are you? But, you know, you're comfortable in your lameness. It's easy to be lame, and I'm talking about crippled, and I'm talking about just literally being lame. You can be lame as well. It's easy to be lame. You just got to be contrary to everything that everybody else is saying. And somebody say the sky is blue and it's beautiful. I don't like the blue sky. It's easy to be lame. People won't like to talk to you if you're being lame all the time. So what are we going to do when people have miracles? Are we going to be ones that celebrate and are excited that finally, after 38 years of not walking, this man is walking and carrying his bed? Or are we going to be like, well, even though he never walked for 38 years, it's the Sabbath. You shouldn't be doing that. And he's like, okay. And the issue is, who does he listen to? Should he listen to the religious leaders and say, you're right, I give up, I'm not going to walk no more, we can try again tomorrow? Or is he going to say, well, Jesus told me to do this, so either you're going to take it up with him and leave me alone, or I'm going to just keep walking. And either way, I win, because the things that I've been seeking God for, I've gotten. So yeah, that's the most interesting. I like 9 through 15. That's like my favorite part in this whole passage. Instead of being celebratory with the man, they're angry at the man. And sometimes we're the exact same way. You know, God bless me with a new car. We know you've been driving your raggedy 15-year-old car for the last 10 years. It's okay. Your car's still moving, right? You can get an oil change and there's no issues. Why are you mad that somebody else, after driving a bus or taking Uber for the last 3 years, finally gets a car? Oftentimes, our bitterness towards not having what's fresh and what's new spoils the blessing that we already have. And it spoils our joy. You know, you're not supposed to let the devil steal your joy, but sometimes we steal our own joy. So, yeah, there's that. It's easy to steal your own joy too, you know. You can make yourself mad really easy. Think about something that makes you angry, hold on to that for the whole day, and spew it out at everybody else. Because there's always a reason to be angry. You know, you can always find a reason to be mad, justifiable or unjustifiable. So the choice is yours. Let's celebrate when people have miracles. So on Sunday, I'm going to be looking now. I'm going to try to get everybody on camera. If somebody give a testimony, y'all all better clap. I know everybody in this audience. I'll be watching. Let me stop playing. I won't be watching. Don't even look at me. I probably will forget what I said today. So let's go to chapter 5, verse 16 to 24. It's going to be a lot of reading, but we'll do it. For this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him because he had done these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. Therefore, the Jews sought all the more to kill him because he not only broke the Sabbath, but he also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Then Jesus answered and said to them, most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all things that he himself does, and he will show him greater works than these, that you may marvel. For as the Father raises the dead and gives life to them, even so the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son, that all shall honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Most assuredly I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life, and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life. We're going to be here for the rest of the remainder of the time probably. It's a lot here. So let's start here. Let's start with chapter 6, verse 16 of chapter 5. It says, Jesus is persecuted. You right? He says that the people start to persecute him and they want to kill him. So now you have no excuse for when you do right to say, why, Lord, why am I being punished for doing right? Because even Jesus himself was punished for doing the right thing. Right there. He healed a man, and the first thing they want to do is kill him. So, you know, people talking about you don't seem as bad anymore, right? Imagine you're 5 years old, you learn how to tie your shoe, and your mama whoop you for tying your shoes. Like, why are you whooping me for tying my shoe? Don't you want me to learn how to tie my shoe? Or, you know, if Johnny has 5 apples, you learn why Johnny has the 5 apples, and you still get whooped. Y'all can tell. That's why I'm good at math now. I knew why Johnny had, if he had 5 apples and gave Jim 2, he has 3 apples left. I knew that. So yeah, Jesus is persecuted. There shouldn't be something profound to us that Jesus was persecuted, because obviously we are saved by his stripes and his blood through the crucifixion. But, you know, most of the time we only focus on, oh, Jesus was crucified. That's super extreme. I'm dealing with something small over here. But even when Jesus was healing people, he was persecuted for healing people. And so when we are dealing in our lives with stuff, you know, we're doing the right thing, and it seems like you can't catch a W no matter what you do. You know, you do the right thing, you don't win. You pay your bills, you still don't got enough money for all the food that you want to eat. And it's like, Lord, I'm doing everything right. Why is this all difficult for me? Because life is difficult. And even if God tells somebody to do something, they can choose not to listen to him. Don't believe me? Ask Noah. But he was the only righteous person in his generation. Everybody else was doing whatever they wanted to, even though it was just about 400 years after, about 900 years after the creation of earth. So, just because you're doing right and you're seeing other people, it's funny because I was talking to somebody yesterday. I was like, man, if I was making a YouTube channel where I was just twerking and doing whatever, I'd have 1 million views and I'd be making money. But you're doing right and you don't get nothing. And that's what I was talking to somebody about yesterday. It's funny. And then today, lo and behold, I got to lead Bible study. And I was like, wow, today is for me, right? So, yeah, we can complain. I can say, man, if I had an OnlyFans account, for those who don't know, OnlyFans is like Strippers Anonymous, basically. You can go online. Nobody would know that you're renting out a stripper, and you can watch their videos that you pay for. That's for the people who don't know. Everybody who know what OnlyFans is, it's basically that. It's basically that. Nobody knows who you are except the person. One lady actually, since we're on it, I'm going to just talk about it. She actually got paid $50,000 to sleep with one dude. So, it's weird stuff like that. And people, it's really weird. Don't look it up. Please don't. I regret even telling you. But it was, I looked around, and when I said OnlyFans, some people were confused, so I had to say that. So, it's basically, it's bad. But I could do that and make a lot of money, but is God glorified in me being on OnlyFans? Absolutely not, And what is money in the grand scheme of your life? It's really important, don't get me wrong, but, you can make it without money, God provided for Elijah when he was in the wilderness running away from Jezebel. He gave him the quails to eat. So we can get the same thing. So we have to be willing to suffer for doing what's right, because we're supposed to be Christians, which we were first called Christians in Antioch for being like Christ. So we're supposed to be like Christ. When Christ was persecuted, what did he do? He took it. And he was like, yeah, okay, y'all want to persecute me? What did he do next? While he was suffering persecution, he tells them to listen, believe, and receive everlasting life. That's beautiful. Instead of, because he's getting persecuted, cry and say, woe is me. He said, you know what? I'm being persecuted, but let me tell y'all something about myself. First off, he declares himself to be equal with God, thus declaring himself to be God. And at this point, as a religious leader, instead of being mad about him healing somebody on the Sabbath, they should have recognized, hey, he just said he's equal with God. He just did a miracle and made a man walk that hadn't walked for 38 years. We probably should listen to what he's saying and probably take heart to what he's talking about. But instead, they don't listen. And so then Jesus explains that God told me to do this, basically is what he says. The Son can do nothing of himself, but he has to do it through the Father. So he's basically telling them, God told me to heal this man, so if you got a problem with me, you got issues with God. And that was a problem with the religious leaders, and that's a problem with a lot of people now. They can tell you, some people can quote all of Psalms 119. They can quote the whole book of James, and I'll clap hands for them and say, wow, that was very impressive. But when it comes to the things of understanding God, they don't know anything. They can know all these scriptures, and then when it comes to understanding who the Messiah is, even to this day, with all the stuff that we have and everything, people still don't recognize the Messiah. And it's like, come on, man. They say Jesus was a good guy, and then you bring him to John chapter 5 and say, so then why was he saying that he was equal with God, and he was God's son, and that makes him equal with God? Oh, that's just something extra that, no. Because you're trying to use the Bible to justify yourself, but when the Bible disagrees with you, you try to throw it away. And so that's some of us in church, We're so focused on our duties as an elder, our duties as a member of the church. I'm supposed to mop the floor every Tuesday at 7. It's that when God says, hey, come with me, let's go do something, you're like, that's not what I'm supposed to do as a Christian, even though that's your main purpose. And so Jesus is trying to tell them, I'm doing what God told me to do. And if you're not willing to do what God told you to do, how can you call yourself a part of God or a religious leader? So he's really challenging their authority, because how can you tell us what's right to do on the Sabbath where you're not even obeying God? Because was it for them to argue on the Sabbath? Was it for them to go around policing people on the Sabbath? Obviously the priests were supposed to tell you, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. But everybody, the Pharisees are not the priest. Are they supposed to go around saying, you're not supposed to be doing it on the Sabbath? Because technically that's work, what they're doing. You're working your whole Sabbath, making sure other people are keeping the Sabbath instead of keeping the Sabbath. Instead of when God tells you to sit down and relax, you're doing everything that everybody else is supposed to be doing. So they're actually contradicting themselves. By focusing on what other people should be doing on the Sabbath instead of fulfilling the Sabbath as God called them to do, they're in as much disobedience as somebody working on the Sabbath. And Jesus is like, I came and healed a man, and instead of focusing on the Sabbath and worshiping in the temple like you're supposed to be doing, you focused on me. And yeah, we could talk about this for a long time because the Pharisees really funny for that. Because why would you be focused more on other people on the Sabbath instead of doing what you're supposed to do? That brings up another point. If I'm supposed to be leading the choir in a song, why am I in the usher stand trying to lead people in the church while I'm trying to lead the choir? If you're not where you're supposed to be, there's going to be chaos. If you're not doing what you're supposed to do, there's going to be chaos. And if you're not resting in the Lord, you're going to find yourself, just like the religious leaders, accusing somebody else of something while you yourself are in sin. And that's difficult for you, not for the person who you're accusing. It's difficult for you because while they're doing what God told them to do, you're still doing stuff you're not supposed to be doing. And so now, who's really to blame and who's really in disobedience? Who's really suffering from bitterness? Is it the person who just got healed, or is it you who, being healed and knowing the word, are disobeying God? And that's where I find difficulty in this chapter. Because it's like, man, sometimes you do look at other people and say, well, they not doing this, and that. But I always think of it this way. When I was in school in my math class, some kid wanted to cheat off me. At Ole Miss, by the way, some dude wanted to cheat off me. I met him in Cal 3. We were in Cal 4 together. He was like, hey, man, this is the final test. I don't think I'm prepared. Can I sit next to you and copy you? If I could just see your processes. I still have those texts. I can show you if you want to see them. He said, if I can just see your process, I'll be able to do my stuff. I sit on the front row. The professor knew me. I helped her with some of her website stuff. I said, no, I'm not doing that. But the issue, I brought that up to say, if we're focused on somebody else's test, if we're focused on what somebody else is doing and what they're doing wrong, how are you ever going to know what you're doing wrong? So by the time the 50 minutes is up, you can say, Professor, I can show you everything that they did wrong on their test. The professor comes up to your paper and says, you didn't even write your name on your test. So while they may get a 97, you're going to get a 0. And that's how you can find yourself. You could be the perfect reader of the Bible. If you could sit here for the next 12 hours and quote from Genesis 1, verse 1 to Revelation 22, we will all clap hands for you, right? We'll all celebrate. We say, wow, that was amazing, wasn't it? And then in that same breath, go outside and box somebody. Are we going to be like, this is a good man of God? He fighting somebody over a parking spot. Where's the patience at? You know the word, you don't got no patience. If I could give a million examples. If he can preach good, I'm talking about he can preach good. Next thing you see, single dude preaching good. Next thing you see, he on a cruise, 1-bedroom cruise with his friend. And he's like, how are you on a 1 bed on the cruise with this woman? But you telling us we got to get right with God. So oftentimes we're looking at other people telling them, you got to get right, you got to get right, you got to get right. And God like, man, you need to get right. You smelling yourself, blaming everybody else. He who smelt it dealt it, right? That's what we say. So you must have dealt it. But yeah, so that's what I think about. And then Jesus tells them that they can receive everlasting life if they're willing to accept him. He says in verse 24, I say unto you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death to life. And he's really telling them what he's not saying, but he kind of is. He said, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me. So he's basically telling them, y'all not listening to God. Because, they know all the scripture, but they obviously wasn't listening. And that's what we do sometimes. Read the whole New Testament, read the whole Old Testament, and still you're dealing with something, but instead of focusing on what you got to do, you focus on what other people got to do. Let's go to verse 25 through 30. Let's read that. It says, Most assuredly I say to you, the hour is coming, and it now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so has he granted the Son to have life in himself, and has given him authority to execute judgment, also because he is the Son of Man. Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice. Man, I can't see for some reason. I feel older than I am. And come forth, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. Jesus calls himself the judge, and all who listen will have life. All those who do not will rise to condemnation. That's the part that I really like right there. Those who listen will live in the resurrection of life, and there's a resurrection of condemnation. And he's saying, which one are you going to be in? Are you going to be in the resurrection of condemnation or the resurrection of life? Again, let's think about this. He's not just talking to some random Jews here, some people who don't know the law. He's talking to people who studied the law and who have become Pharisees, believing in the resurrection of the dead. And by this point, Jesus had not resurrected anybody from the dead. But if I saw a man who had been 38 years without the ability to walking, I might believe him. So these people believe that he can resurrect. These people believe that there's resurrection of the dead through God. You can find out more about that in Acts when Paul was being persecuted. When he came back to Jerusalem, he said, brothers, I'm a Pharisee. They're trying to lock me up because I believe in the resurrection of the dead. And he caused a whole argument to happen between them, which was pretty slick on his part, but it didn't, they still persecuted him. So the question is, are you going to be in the resurrection of life or the resurrection of condemnation? And so he tells us that he's the judge, and what he hears, he will judge by, and he's a righteous judge. I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. So he's the judge. He hears everything that we're doing. He knows what we're doing, knows what we're seeking, knows what we're thinking. Are we living a life that's leading towards the resurrection of life or the resurrection of condemnation? Because we're all going to rise. If you died today, you're going to come back. And are you coming back to live and reign with God, or are you coming back to be condemned? Some people believe that the decision was made at creation that certain people were going to be condemned and certain people were going to be raised into resurrection. And if that's the case, it causes a lot of problems for you as a Christian because there's no free will for us. But we believe, you have the option, you have the choice. You make your decisions, and at the end of your life, those choices have consequences. Oftentimes we see somebody get off for raping somebody or somebody getting off for murder, and you're like, Lord, when is the justice going to come? Trust and believe God will bring justice in the end. If they don't get right with God, they're going to get the ultimate justice. But even then, your actions have consequences. If I lie to my dad and say I'm a preacher on Sunday, but me and Jemiah are going to go out of town, and then I call him on the way out of town and say, hey, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And I ask the Lord for forgiveness. Sure, I was forgiven, and sure, he forgives me and the Lord forgives me, but the consequence is still there. Somebody got to preach on Sunday. So even if you do get forgiven by God, your actions still have consequences. Now, God can choose to give you mercy, and sometimes those consequences will go away. But if, let's say, for 30 years you abandoned your children, you can't expect, because you're forgiven with God, to have a relationship with your children day one after you've been forgiven, because those actions that you have taken have consequences. And sometimes that line of thinking makes me paralyzed. I'm like, what should I do in this moment? Should I fight? Should I be quiet? Should I do this? Should I do that? Because there's consequences for every action. Now, let's not forget, God has mercy and grace towards us. That's not to say you're on your deathbed, you accidentally sin, because we all sin daily. And if you say you don't, just don't say you don't. I'm not even going to look. I'm not even going to look. So we all have struggles and sins. I don't think God's going to send you to hell because, you accidentally lied right before you died. 2 seconds before you died, you said one lie, so you're not going to heaven. I was like, wow, God, okay, one sin. Because also, I think it's in the book of James, it talks about sins that lead to death, and there are some sins that don't lead to death. And so that's another conversation. We won't talk about that today. We'll stay out of it. If you have questions on that, wait for Bishop next week. Say, somebody said something about sins that lead to life and sins that lead to death and the sins that don't. Can you talk about that? Because, yeah, we don't have time. So, yeah, Jesus is giving them the option right now. He's basically telling them, y'all want to kill me because I did what's right and what God told me to do, but God has made me the judge. So I make the decision on the Sabbath because I do what he told me to do. So you can choose to listen to me and have life, or you can do your own thing, and when you rise, because you will rise, you're going to be like, well, I'm back. Oh, I'm condemned. So he says, you choose which path you take. And you would think that they would listen to him. They probably didn't, because going on, he's still going to be talking. So that's for us. Our question is, are we walking in resurrection? Or are we the resurrection? We're walking in resurrection regardless, but are we walking in that of life or that of condemnation? Every single decision that we make, every single choice that we make is being piled up. So yes, you can ask God for forgiveness for not talking to anybody on the street or not going with the door-to-door ministry on March 7th at 12. If you don't go, and you can say, Lord, I had 11 at 11. If you don't go with them on March 7th at 11, you can say, I didn't want to go with the door-to-door ministry. And then God's like, hey, you should go with the door-to-door ministry. But when you get to heaven, God going to say, so why didn't you go with the door-to-door ministry anytime that I told you there was a specific person that I needed you to go talk to, because everybody else could talk to them and they won't listen to them, but you have similar things that they had went through and you can help them out. Because we also know there's two different judgments. And the judgment for those who follow God is going to be, why didn't you do what I told you to do? And you're going to have to give an explanation for why you didn't. And if the explanation is, Lord, you knew it was football season. I had to watch Ole Miss play. So I couldn't come on Saturday. It was football games all weekend. I had to see what was going to happen. Or, Lord, you knew that Saturday is my only day to sleep in, because Sundays I got to be here at 7 o'clock for whatever I got to be here for, whether it be filling up the water jugs or singing in the choir. So I didn't want to come on Saturday from 11 to 12, even though I wake up at 9:35 every Saturday, because I didn't want to. So even if you do have the resurrection of life, you're still going to have to make an explanation for why you didn't do what God told you to do. So the decision is yours. Either you can, you don't have to. I'm not going to tell you got to do what God told you to do. It'd be preferred if you did, just like it'd be better if you pay off the credit card instead of just maxing them out. But you can do what you want. I'm just here to tell you, when you get up there, if we are like, well, I'm glad you made it in, because some people are going to make it in, barely make it in. Because when all their works are taken, Paul talks about all of our earthly works are going to be put on the fire. And whatever remains, that will be our crown. That would be on our crown. Some of people, all their work's going to be put on there. They're going to have a speck of gold and say, God bless you. That's all you get for everything that you did. And you can say, Lord, but I studied the Bible every day. I read the whole Bible every day of my life in 30 minutes. You can say, great job, you did that, but in Matthew chapter 28, verse 19, I told you to go into all the nations, and you couldn't even go door to door on Saturday on March 7th at 11 a.m. for an hour. And just say, God loves you, we're praying for you. If you want to come to church with us, you can. So the choice is ours in everything that we do. And when we get to heaven, and I pray that we all make it together, I pray that we all make it in, I'd hate to, somebody in this room don't make it, I'd be like, man, that's messed up. And worst of all, I hate it if it's me, so I'm making sure I'm getting there every day of the week, 24/7. I'm saying, Lord, help me to get there. That's my prayer. Every time, if you want to argue with somebody, just remember, just say, Lord, help me to get there. And then you argue a little more respectfully. So, yeah, that's our choice. Resurrection of life, resurrection of condemnation. What are we choosing daily? And if we're choosing the resurrection of life, are we choosing to have our works considered for greatness, or have our works considered as nothing, burned away with the ash, burned away? So every day that you live, you should be thinking about that. What am I doing so that my works are not a detriment to myself? Because imagine you get up to heaven, somebody's like, yeah, life was hard. I was persecuted. They chopped my head off and killed my whole family because we believed in God. And you're like, well, in my time, we were able to do whatever we wanted. And I sat at home most of the time and didn't do anything. Imagine that conversation. I'm gonna be like, well, all right, brother, I'm gonna go ahead and talk to some other people. What's your testimony? Well, I got saved. I sat in this specific seat every Sunday. I died, and I went to heaven. What a testimony. Did you help anybody get saved? Actually, I was one of the main leaders of kicking people out of the church because they sneezed wrong while the preacher was preaching. And they used the pastor's tissue on the stage and didn't get the one down here. Wow, that's great. We help jailers that are putting us in jail get saved and come to Christ. You know, so the choice is ours, what we do with our lives, what we do as we're walking to condemnation or to resurrection. Because again, it's your choice. I can't tell you what to do. Do you believe in God? Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that he's the righteous judge? Then are you going to do what God said to do, or are you not? The choice is not mine again, it's yours. Because I know that I'm striving to do it. Sometimes I fail. Sometimes I'm like, man, God, I could have did better. I got a ticket last week. The Lord told me to pray for the officer, but my excuse was when I shook his hand, he was behind my door, so it would have been awkward for me to try to reach out and say, hey, wait, let me. And because he walked up to the car, he had his hand on his gun. I was like, Lord, I mean, you know, I don't want to have to have any issues. That was my excuse last week. I should have did it. And I got the ticket. He gave me a ticket too. I wasn't speeding, by the way. I just want that to be on the record. It wasn't a speeding ticket. It was something so silly that I'm fighting this. I said, Lord, if you're just, please let the judge be just as well, because this got to go. But yeah, so when it came to that, either I could have said, let me pray for you so that when you're going on your patrol, you're doing good. Or in my case, I said, you already gave me a ticket. I wasn't doing really anything, so it's whatever. Just go about your business, sir. I'm not wishing anything bad on you, but I'm not praying for you either. This is me, guys. It's okay, you can lie. It is funny. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of funny. I'm like, man. Because it was a good day, too. Up to that point, it was a good day. I was at home. I cooked my wife lunch. She went to class. I said, let me go to South Haven and continue doing some work for the Lord. I was on 51, right near Goodman, and I got stopped. And I was going 45, too. So, right here, by this gas station. Right on, yeah, I figured it out now. And I was in a Beetle, a VW Beetle. That's the most innocent car you can be in. Why are you stopping me in a VW Beetle? But it is what it is. And he thought, it was an interesting encounter. I don't think it doesn't matter what he thought. I don't know. But the Lord told me to pray for the dude, because I said, next time I get stopped, I'm going to pray for the officer. But he came, gave me the ticket and said, here's the date, whatever, call this number sometime. And then he shook my hand. He was too far. I couldn't do it. I was like, oh, he's too far anyway. And he was walking fast. I was like, maybe he's got somewhere to be. I can't. But that was my excuse. So our actions have consequences. So hopefully I don't get stopped by the police again, because I don't need to go through this lesson again, but I probably am. And so next time, I'm going to make sure that I do right before you leave, because I said I'd do it after the business is conducted. And I told him, I said, I'm like 1 mile away from the church. I'm about to go help clean up and do some stuff. He said, okay, give me your license. I knew it was over. I said, okay, that's fine. Just go ahead and take it. But yeah, pray for me. I'm going to be fighting that ticket. Lord knows. Lord knows. Let's read verse 31 through 47, the final verses of this chapter. It says, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. There is another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesses of me is true. You have sent to John, and he was born witness to the truth. He has borne witness to the truth. Yet I do not receive testimony from man, but I say these things that you may be saved. He was the burning and shining lamp, and you were willing for a time to rejoice in his light. But I have a greater witness than John's, for the works which the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I do bear witness of me. that the Father has sent me. And the Father himself who sent me has testified of me. You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. But you do not have his word abiding in you, because whom he sent, him you do not believe. You search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life. But these are they which testify of me. But you are not willing to come to me. But you are not willing to come to me that you may have life. I do not receive honor from men. But I know you, that you do not have the love of God in you. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you will receive. How can you believe who receive honor from one another and do not seek the honor that comes from the only God? Do not think I shall accuse you to the Father, but there is one who accuses you, Moses, in whom you trust. For if you believe Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? That's hot, ain't it? And then, I guess he left after that. I just spoiled verse 1 of chapter 6. He left after that. Jesus literally went and dropped the mic and was like, y'all can't kill me anyway. It's not my time. I'm gone. So, 3 witnesses he talks about. The first one being John, which is interesting because the people were excited when John came around. They was like, is this the Elijah that they were talking about that's going to come before the Messiah? They were really excited for John, even though some of the Pharisees were still hating on John because he was out in the wilderness and he was wearing camel skin, and you're not supposed to really touch dead animals as a Jew. It's a lot there too. But they were excited for John, and he's like, yeah, y'all were happy when John was here and talking to him, and you were actually rejoicing in what he said, which is interesting. But John was a witness to the truth of who Jesus was. And so, we're happy when the pastor's talking about standing in the spiral. But then when Jesus is like, yeah, I'm here with you to stand in the spiral. Man, Jesus, stop. Bishop got me. He said stand in the spiral. You just hear. Psalm 77 is enough. Because it comes before Psalm 78. That's what I remember from Sunday. I don't need you to stand with me. I got my life group to stand with. We can talk about standing in the spiral, and I'll see him next week. So John's the first witness. They tolerated John, and then he says his miracles are his second witness. So he's telling them again, y'all saw me heal this man. And instead of believing because I've done these miracles, you're like, nah, he's not the one for us. They believe John off his words, and Jesus is like, I'm talking like John. That's my first witness. John and me, we like freaking frack. We talking the same stuff. And then his miracles, he's like, obviously I'm from God. I'm doing these things in God's name. And later on, they talk about how they thought he was a son of the devil and Jesus is like, how can a house be divided against himself? Abraham Lincoln stole that from Christ. But he said, how can a house be divided against himself? It doesn't make sense for the devil to cast out the devil. So how can the devil cast out the devil? Obviously, this is from God. And then, you also see some of the Pharisees talk about how I think it was, somebody talked about Bar Jesus, and if this is really not the Christ, and if the movement, it's in the Acts. If they're not of God, then God will take them away. Because just like he did to Bar Jesus, who called himself the Messiah. And he said, so let's see what happens with them. And so obviously all these signs point to that Jesus, he's telling them, hey, I'm him. I'm the one that y'all are looking for, because I have my witnesses. He said, but I have a greater witness than John, for the works which the Father has given me to finish, the very works I do, bear witness of me that the Father has sent me. So he told them plain. People always say Jesus didn't talk plain. He never said that he was God. And it's like, you got to read stuff in context. There was a dude a few days ago saying, you don't need to have context. You don't need to know the background. You're supposed to only read in the spirit. And I was like, what spirit are you reading in there? But yeah, so he tells them plain. The works I'm doing is from God. And how can you say, if an angel of the Lord stirs the waters of Bethesda to heal people, how can you say a man healing a dude at the pool of Bethesda is not of God? It's like, come on. If the angel that stirs the waters, according to verse 3 and 4, is the one that heals people, and I went to the pool of Bethesda and healed a man, obviously I'm from God as well, right? That's what you would think. By deduction, you would think that. But they're not listening to his deduction of what's going on. And so he's like, okay, since you're not going to listen to that, I have the third witness, the Father himself. This verse 37, he said, and the Father himself who sent me has testified of me. You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. So he's telling them, the man that y'all claiming, y'all don't even know. The person that you repping, you don't even talk to. That's like me saying, me and Bishop, we best friends. I know his favorite color. I know all of this. And then you're like, Bishop, do you know Akili Matthews? I never met this man in my life. You know, Bishop told me to tell you to go wash out the sinks in every classroom. And then you go to Bishop, hey, do you know this brother? He said, you told me to go wash out the sink. And you're like, no, I don't know him. So now Jesus is saying, you don't have a relationship with the person that you claiming to know. Bishop won't want you doing that. You don't even know Bishop. I have to use an earthly example for certain things because it's harder with heavenly things. It gets a little more issue-y. So, yeah. He says, you haven't heard his voice at any time, nor have you seen him. Do you know how he knows they haven't seen him? They just saw a miracle, and instead of focusing on the miracle, they're focusing on what he needs to be doing in the law, which is interesting because the very law that they're reading has tons of miracles in it. With Moses giving the Israelites water in many different ways. The first way with the root because the water was bitter, and then with hitting the stone, and even when he hit the stone the second time out of disobedience, it still produced the water for them. Joshua and the people going over the wall, crumbling the walls of Jericho and succeeding in their campaign to take over the land. You guys know all this. You read all the scriptures. You even seen how in Judges, when the Benjaminites were in disobedience, how God helped all the other tribes defeat them, even though they were expert marksmen, so that they were not able to overtake the land with their evil. But instead of that, you're focused on why this man is walking on the Sabbath. So you're so focused on what the law says, you're not focused on what the whole Torah was talking about. You're not focused on what all the scriptures that you read were talking about. So that's how he said, obviously you haven't heard God's voice, neither have you seen him. Because if they did, they'd recognize that there were a lot of examples of things happening on the days that you weren't supposed to do things, or people doing stuff that they had no business doing that God allowed because it was important to allow. Like, for instance, David ate the bread of the table. He wasn't supposed to eat the bread. Him and his men weren't supposed to eat the bread. It was only for the priest to eat. But, David being anointed of God, like, look, man, we need to eat something. And the Levite that was in there was like, I'm about to get in trouble giving you this bread. You're not supposed to eat it, but go ahead and take it anyway, because he knew what was going on. So God had already given them examples of religious leaders breaking the rules, I say, with quotations, because they recognized the Spirit of God in the person. David even wore the priestly robes and went into the Holy of Holies. David's not supposed to go to the Holy of Holies. He's just a regular, David was son of Jesse, is from Judah. He's just a Judite. He's just from Judah. The Levites are the only ones that's supposed to go into the Holy of Holies, and only specific Levites under the trail of Aaron. His descendants are supposed to go into the Holy of Holies. The rest of the Levites are just supposed to help out around the temple. But David went in there anyway. But they read the Torah, they read all of that, and they still came to the conclusion that, that's not right. Esther was a queen of a heathen nation. And she had to, Mordecai told her, you might as well eat the pork because you don't need them to know that you're not, you don't need them to know that you're a Jew. Live like everybody else lived. So she was eating the pork, eating the fat, doing everything that she was not supposed to be doing, and God used her to redeem the people in Persia. But if the Pharisees were there during that time, they would have said, how dare you eat pork, even though she's saving them from being killed by Haman and the Agagites. So there's many examples that Jesus is pointing to basically by saying, if you just read the scriptures that you claim you know, you would see that there are certain circumstances in which God allows things to happen that he told certain people not to do. And in Jesus' case, he said he's God. He's equal with God, so he can do whatever he wants to do. But instead of recognizing John as the first witness to bring the Messiah, they ignore him. And then he says, look at my works. They ignore that. And then when he says, I'm equal with God, and if a man raise a man and let him walk after 38 years, I'm willing to bet that he's talking from God. Because in Deuteronomy, they gave them the test for prophets and they gave them the test for preachers. If a prophet says that something's going to come true in your life, and it does, if that prophet is not pointing you to God and pointing you to something else, then that's a false prophet sent to test you. That's what they knew from Deuteronomy, which we'll get to after we finish John. But instead of listening to that, because did Jesus point them anywhere else? He talked about the Father most of the time in this chapter. He talked about God. Did he point them and say, everybody don't follow the law anymore, don't keep the Sabbath? No, I healed one man and he picked up his bed and walked. He's been resting for 38 years. I promise you, his legs have had enough sitting down that he can at least get up and walk. He's been hoping for a reason to walk, and now he has one. But instead of listening to that and seeing the whole context of the situation, they ignored all of those things and just said, shame on you for healing somebody on the Sabbath. And is that what we do? You know, we know the scriptures, we know what the word says, but we say, shame on you for doing this on this specific day at this specific time. Shame on you for getting somebody saved and you know it's 6 p.m. prayer. You should have been on Zoom. This brother just got saved. I was in the street. I didn't have time to get on Zoom. You should have been on Zoom. You didn't help him get, you could have just told him to get on Zoom with you. That's not how God wanted to work. And you see this theme with the Pharisees throughout the whole text, because they never changed their ways. And oftentimes, the issue is, who are we hanging around? Because there was 2 Pharisees that we know, I believe Josephus and Nicodemus, who were secret disciples of Jesus. They talk about that later in John when Josephus is going to bury him. Nicodemus was there when he was being accused, but you know, they were secret disciples of John. But who you hang around is going to dictate how you see God. So if you hang around the Pharisees all the time, you're going to be just like Paul. You're ready to kill some folks that's not listening to what y'all saying. How dare they meet in the synagogue and talk about the resurrection of the dead when they're supposed to be doing what we tell them to do and reading the Torah in the synagogue? That's what happened to Paul. He was indoctrinated by them. So who you hang around impacts how you see God, impacts how you experience God, and in this case, impacts how you're not experiencing him. Because they were so focused on reading the word that they forgot to look up and see the Lord at work around them. Imagine if David was like the Pharisees. He would have just starved to death. He wouldn't have got the bread off the table of showbread. He wouldn't have even went there and said, look, we hungry. And God anointed me as king. He put his spirit within me. I need this food for my people and me. He would have just said, I give up on that. Well, we just going to die in the wilderness. Imagine if Elijah was a really devout prophet, and just like the Pharisees, he wouldn't have spent time in Egypt. He would have went to Jerusalem and stayed there, because at a certain time they told everybody to make a decision. Either you're going to worship our gods or you're going to go to Jerusalem, because you can't keep flip-flopping over, because what's his name? Rehoboam's Solomon's I forgot his name, son of Nebat, the son of Nebat, whatever his name was, Jeroboam. He didn't like that the people were going all the way to Jerusalem to worship God, so he put up some gods for himself. And so if Elisha was actually listening, even though this was a few 100 years before him, if he was actually listening, he would have just said, as soon as he had the knowledge of God, I'm just going to go to Jerusalem and worship God there, because obviously I'm supposed to go make a pilgrimage every year, so why am I here fighting Jezebel? But would he be in the spirit of God? Would he be following what God told him to do? Because oftentimes, our excuse is not that the police officer was too far back. Our excuse is, God, you said that we should live peaceably with all men. So instead of standing up for what you want me to do, I'm going to just live at peace with everybody and not say nothing. And silence is not equal to peace. Peace and silence are 2 different things. Because we've seen it with different people. I know everybody can think of an example of somebody who remained silent when things were going on in their house, going on around them, instead of standing up for what's right. And what's the end result in those cases? Nothing good for the person that was silent. Even in Germany, during World War II, before World War II, when Hitler was rising to power, most of the Christians were quiet. Instead of doing what's right, they were quiet. Even down here in the South, I always think about it. I'm like, if the church was really the church, segregation would have ended in the 1800s. But instead, people were silent about what should be right, what should be wrong. What's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. I love in To Kill a Mockingbird, Miss Merriweather talking about how the James Everett, J.G. Everett or something, he's going to this tribe in the middle of South Asia, in South America, helping them out. And in the same breath talks about how you can't save Negroes. I was like, that's so funny. Because that's how we are too. We may not have that dichotomy, but we like, you can't save those people in Orange Mound. You can only deal with the people in South Haven. God can't save those people. Even Peter fell into that trap until in Acts chapter 10, God sent him to Cornelius, and he was even like, nah, salvation for the Jews. Even after Acts chapter 2, and he saw all those 3,000 people be saved, he still was like, salvation is for the Jews. And when the Jews were segregated from the Gentiles, he was one of the ones segregated. And Paul had a choice. He could either be quiet and say, yeah, that's what the law said, because Paul was an expert in the law. He had like 5 PhDs. He could have said, the law says to ignore, not to congregate with the Gentiles. Or he could say, well, the law says that, but Jesus has overcome he has overcome the law. He has fulfilled the law for us, and he said that these people aren't valid and they need to be here. So he had an option. I could be quiet and let things go the way they are, or I could stand up for what I believe in. And that's what we have an option in this church. Are we going to be the seeds of unity or the seeds of disunity? Are we going to be the ones that's always telling somebody, until I hear you speak in tongues, you don't got the Holy Ghost? So every time they come to the altar, come on, let me hear it. Let me hear it. It's like their deliverance has nothing to do with your ears. From our mouth to his ears, right? So why are you worried about what they've got going on with the Lord? Send me a text every day and show me a picture of you reading the Bible. And then I'm going to ask you questions on that chapter. If you don't answer that, you're not reading the Bible. You're not like the rest of us. It's like, my Lord, I can't even live with Christ. To live as Christ and to die as gain. But for you to live in Christ is a shackling. You got to lock me up. So we could be like the Pharisees, or we could be like all these examples in the Old Testament. Moses murdered a man, and then Moses married a woman that wasn't a part of the Israelites. And when Aaron and Miriam came and did exactly what the Pharisees are doing here and said, you're not supposed to be married to her according to what God told you to say. Guess what happened to Miriam? She got leprosy, and Aaron was like, oh, well, Lord, please forgive her. I'm sorry. Can you go talk to God for us? Because I'm sorry. But God had to make an example out of them. If they were recognizing the law of God, they would have saw that. But they weren't. And God's like, I got these 3 witnesses. John witnessed of my coming. Here I am. I did this miracle. Here you are denying it. Well, you're not denying it. They never denied that he healed the man. They just didn't like the day that he did it. And then God is my witness because I'm here doing what he told me to do, and they're not accepting that because they neither see him nor hear him. And so instead of focusing on everybody else and on what they're supposed to be doing, we should be focusing on our relationship with Christ and what we should be able to hear God for ourselves. You shouldn't always need a prophet to tell you to do right. That's why Jemiah showed me a funny video a few days ago. The dude's like, he said, I don't think he was even a Christian though, but he was speaking the truth. He said, God gave us common sense for a reason. Why you always got to pray? Sometimes you just got to know, Lord, should I stay with this person and they're abusing me? God already gave you the answer. Think for 2 seconds and you have your answer. But sometimes, we're so busy trying to hear God's voice, we're not listening to him. It's like, Lord, I need you to speak to me in a specific way. Elijah had this problem. He did some great miracles. He did the offering against, he defeated the idols of Baal, the priest of Baal. He killed all of them, and Jezebel said, all right, I'm coming for you. What did he do? He ran into the wilderness and hid. And as he was hiding in the cave, a thunderstorm came, but God wasn't in the storm. A great wind came, but God wasn't in the wind. But God came and whispered in his ear, what are you doing, Elijah? But oftentimes, the thunderstorm comes for us. We run outside and say, well, it's raining, and now my life is difficult, but God ain't here. Because we're not willing to listen to God. We're willing to listen to the theatrics. We'd rather have theatrics than have God. So yeah, that's the question for us today. Are we listening? Because Jesus continues and says, but you do not have his word abiding in you, because whom he sent, him you do not believe. That's the other thing. Do we abide in God? Psalm 37, I believe it says, abide in me and I'll abide in you. Psalm 37, verse 8, I believe. I want to get this verse. This is the one I do want to get. 37, I believe. 137, verse. Sometimes I be having these. Yes, 37:4. Delight yourselves in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to him. Trust in the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. He shall bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass. Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret, it only causes harm. Yeah, it was Psalm 37. It's really it starts in verse 1. Psalm 37 is perfect for those times when you're feeling discouraged and you're like, man, God, everything I do is wrong. Psalm 37 is perfect. Do not fret because of evildoers, nor be envious of the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like grass and wither as the green herb. And then it says, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. I only brought that up because in verse 38 of chapter 5 of John, he says, you guys are not abiding in him. So if we're not abiding in God, we're cooked. I say cooked every time I get up. I got to find something else. But we're finished if we don't abide in God. So if you're spending so much time, and don't get me wrong, did you have a question? That was one of them, but I didn't want to spoil for when we do chapter 15. I knew 37 had it too, but thank you. Yeah, John chapter 15, the true vine. I believe he preached on it before, and he talks about the three different vines: the one that has to be lifted up, the one that's producing fruit being pruned, and the one that's not connected that will be thrown into the fire. And yeah, so if you're not abiding in him, and sometimes we think abiding in God is just reading the Bible, but sometimes you just got to sit and say, Lord, what do you want me to do? And sit in prayer. You know, for me, I'm not going to lie. Reading the Bible is easy. Praying is hard. Because as soon as I sit down, I'm like, all right, Lord, let me set my timer for 15 minutes. Lord, thank you for everything. Amen. What do I do now? Oh, right. Help everybody that I know, including the Christians I don't know. Amen. It's like, you know, because my excuse is God said, don't ask too much. He already knows what you need, so ask it and be done. So I say, Lord, help all the Christians who are being persecuted, help the church to grow, help everything that's going on in the church. You know better than I do. Amen. And I'm like, well, I've got 14 minutes and 35 seconds left. What am I supposed to do now? This was a great time with you, Lord. Amen. Reading the Bible is easy. You know, I can play this while I'm driving. I got an hour drive to get up here, so I can listen to a whole book. I'm like, man, I finished a whole book. And then God's like, well, spend an hour with me in prayer. A whole hour? And then immediately, everything that I could be doing in that hour comes to my head. And if I'm not praying, none of that stuff will be in my head. For some reason, I'm ready to do my work in that hour. I'm like, man, I have ideas. I have to get these ideas onto paper. But yeah, so if we're not abiding in him, we're not going to hear him, and we can't live for him or do what he wants us to do. And oftentimes, we find ourselves condemned because we're not abiding. And so we have the choice. The Pharisees, don't get me wrong, Pharisees was doing a lot. They were reading the word, they were keeping the word, and they were trying to do a good thing by helping other people understand the law, understand what they're supposed to be doing. But in doing that, they forgot to have a relationship with God themselves. So let's give Bishop 8 minutes in the bank for this week, and we can go home. Is that a deal, or do y'all want me to go for the other 8 minutes? Okay, yeah, we're going to go home after this. Because I basically explained the last of the chapter where he's talking about Moses. And also, you do not have the love of God in you. And that's another thing I want to talk about. Be loving to others. You know, God said, he says it in the book of John, this is how they'll know that you're my disciples, that you love one another. And then love covers a multitude of sins. And then also Paul talks about the whole body, as we are the body of Christ, and our shameful parts should be covered. And the things that we have, the pieces that are weak should be covered and held together. If you don't love people, how's the body going to hold itself together? Imagine if the skin didn't love the organs. It says, I hate y'all, and just spills out all your guts. You're not going to survive. It's like, why do you hate my guts? Please put them back. Or if the rib cage said, we hate you, heart. We don't want you, and just crush the heart. So, abiding, if we don't love, you don't have the love of God in you. 1 John chapter 4, it talks about, for the love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knows God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. So if you don't love, you don't know God. And so he was saying, y'all have no love, y'all have no compassion. And yeah, we can stand, we can go home. Yeah, that's John chapter 5. We'll be in John chapter 6 next week. Hopefully you learned something tonight. Hopefully I didn't ramble too long about the ticket. But let's try to abide in Christ this week. Try to show love to one another and rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Because oftentimes we condemn those who are weeping and condemn those who are rejoicing. So what are we supposed to do? Offering, if you have an offering, you can give it. Let's stand so that we can pray and dismiss. Lord. Oh, there's fruit outside. Everybody can get how many pineapples? You can take as many pineapples and bananas as you want. So now, there's a miracle for you tonight. There's pineapples outside. I don't want to hear nobody saying they didn't have a miracle this week. You got pineapples and you got bananas. So let us pray. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything you've done for us. Help us to recognize you when you're moving, not to condemn those who have felt you move, and to continue to walk in love and to abide in you. Help us to be the people that you called us to be and to focus on what you call us to focus on. Thank you, and protect us as we're all going home. And bless everybody as probably about to eat dinner and discuss. And Lord, bless us as we go home once again. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.